this is the question I want to ask that I started to ask the first table. You said I should have, and then the third table said they didn't like it. So we'll see where that goes. But we kind of had a discussion of, not an expert, this is my term, but kind of like an active racism. We were kind of describing different acts of racism. And I asked if there was, I'm asking now, is there a kind of a passive racism in saying it's very popular, it seems to say, I'm colorblind.
Yeah.
I didn't even notice. I don't even know. That's not an issue I deal with because I don't think like that.
Yes.
If I said that, what would you say?
I would say, see me. It's okay to see that I'm black and to see that I'm a female and to see those parts of me. And I think we make the mistake that when we see race, that it automatically is a bad thing. And so Dr. King, people often say color blindness comes from his speech. He didn't say don't see the color of someone's skin. He said don't judge them based on that. So color blindness, I think, allows us to do things like to erase the history. Oh, we don't see race, so then what's the problem? Oh, you could live wherever you want. Well, not really. Not 30 years ago, even in St. Louis, there were restrictive covenants. So I wanted to also pick up to just, while I have this mic, the whole idea that stereotypes always come from somewhere. Oftentimes they were created to create narratives about groups of people. And so I think we have to be really careful when we talk about race to not take the deficit model, to not say, oh, these poor people who don't have this and that, or like I wanted to respond to the comment about, well, if you don't have parents that do a certain thing, or you could get up and pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but that sort of narrative about black people, it was about Chinese people for a while, it was about Irish for a while, that can happen, and it's not because it's true, it's because it's used as a way to shape the narrative about a group.
Okay.
And I will drop the mic.
No.
One thing I remember Dick Gregory saying at one time, why are blacks so angry? And people need to understand, until the system affects us both the same way, we're going to be angry. If I go in the store and you go in the store and I'm the only one followed, you don't say anything about it, you can be sure I'm going to be angry. But if both of us go in the store and both of us are followed, there's a different attitude, there's a different relationship. But until we both are affected and impacted by the system in the same manner, and we understand that, we're going to have problems. And that's one way to get people to understand where we are. The system doesn't impact you the way it impacts me. Until it impacts both of us the same way, we're going to have problems.
Yeah, and I think we have to throw in the term white privilege here. So that is something that used to be really highly skirted. Oh, you can't say that anywhere. I'm very grateful now that it's being introduced more and more often, because people with my skin color have to understand what those differences feel like. We're never going to feel them exactly the same way you would, but they're very real and they have an impact. And so I don't get impacted in the same way that you get impacted, because you get impacted over and over and over and over again. I get to skirt a lot of those.
One of the I shouldn't say kids, one of the young people that we had in the studio, I believe, said, let me see if I can remember exactly how she said it, but you don't think about the fact that you're white. I think about the fact that I'm black. Is that true?
Yeah.
I think so.
We'll try the other one. Yeah, you're right. You couldn't quite hear you.
I think so, and I think it's because we have a situation in this country even today where people have to do the math, they have to do the calculus to determine how to best position themselves so that they have an opportunity and a chance. And so most people of color spend some amount of time trying to figure out exactly how should I dress, what should my hair look like, what should my clothing look, how should I speak, where should I live, what schools are optimal for me to attend in order to be acceptable. And when you're white, you really don't have to, if you just do the basics, generally you're going to be accepted and acceptable. You could make a choice to go to an HBCU and people would say you were brave and what a wonderful thing that was. An African American makes the choice to go to an HBCU and people say, oh, they couldn't cut it at a major white institution. So the realities are just different, and you have to think about those things. You never have the opportunity to just be and be who you are. You're always trying to dress it so that you fit.
That's privilege. That's privilege in itself.
What?
The ability.
Grab the mic.
think that speaks to, white privilege. What's the guy who walks around, he goes around and does seminars on white privilege.
Tim Wise.
Tim Wise, and he talks about that, he does not have, his demographic does not have to adapt to us because they control, essentially, white people control society. Unfortunately, we have to learn how to adapt it to their society, or else we're not going to be, we have issues. Like you talked about the piece of, the double standard. I can't walk in the neighborhood with the hoodie on and some Skittles and feel safe.
But can you come to, I'm thinking about when I show up in a meeting for this show during the middle of the week, and because I have a night job, I roll in jeans and a t-shirt, and everyone else is here in a tie. Would you do that?
Wholly unacceptable for me. I come, I serve in a space where I get looked at in an interesting way for overdressing, right? I sit in a space where I have to sit around tables with people who can wear during the summertime a polo shirt and flip-flops in a meeting, but dare I do that, I wasn't ready for the job. I wasn't ready for the gig. And unless someone honors that reality, so this idea of not seeing, right, of not seeing race. Well, if you don't see race, then you don't fully consider my humanity. And if you're an elected official, if you're someone who makes policy and you don't consider the disparate impact of that policy on specific racial groups, then you are actually harming by not considering it. By not seeing race as you think about policy, you're actually harming people who are people of color, or people who are caught in certain neighborhoods or in the web of poverty. You have to think about these things because the best policy actually places supports in places for people who have to overcome these kinds of challenges. I use the quick example, really great example here locally of an initiative called St. Louis Graduates that is seeking to increase the degree attainment for the entire region. Right, so that the entire 50% of all adults in the region have post-secondary degrees by 2020. Mm-hmm. Well, how do they go about that? Well, they go about that by webbing together a bunch of influential policy people, but focusing their strategy on people who are minorities primarily, people of color, and low-income students, because you can't lift all boats unless you focus on those that have the greatest challenge. And so I think we have to consider these things not only personally, but more importantly, from a policy perspective. I get over if you talk to me crazy. What I won't get over if you set up a system to where my 3 young boys are going to be locked out of access to opportunity.
And that is not playing the race card. And that's one of the things I wanted to just put out there is that, if you acknowledge these systemic issues, that's not playing the race card. That's naming the reality that is happening in our society. And I think we have to be willing to see that and be grown enough to have the conversation and have the veil of PC or whatever you want to call it lifted and look at the reality of what's happening in our city.
And what I think challenges me the most is when we see leaders who will say, okay, well, I picked up the St. Louis American. I read it. I'm good. I went to the Gateway Classic dinner. I hung out with my black friends. That is not enough. And the conversation needs to elevate. And that's where I see the biggest challenge in the white folks in our community is that they're not understanding how much depth this issue really has. It's not enough what's going on right now.
Tavis Smiley is one of Obama's biggest critics. Mm-hmm. Do you think Obama has done enough in the 2 terms he's been to address the issue on race? It seems like he's always skirting it when he talks about it.
Tavis Smiley is just mad because he couldn't get invited in. We just have to talk to this late on the line. He and Cornel West. If he had asked him for advice, it'd been okay. That's the only problem they have right now.
But as Obama, we have a black president.
He's president for the United States.
But so my question is, where was that question for Bill Clinton, who got credit for hanging out with black folk, going on Arsenio Hall and playing the saxophone? Let's be clear. We need to ask policy questions. Mm-hmm. So when we assess the disparate impact of the COPS program and things that were happening in the Clinton era that put more African Americans in jail because of him trying to look tough on crime and carrying out policies that took Reagan era, Bush era policies to a whole nother level. We didn't ask how much he's doing for black people. So I'm just suggesting that black people get off of that conversation because it's not helpful. It's actually harmful, and we push.
It's a completely it individualizes racism rather than looking at the larger structure.
Systems.
I want to go back to something. I want to go back to what Rena said because I think it's an important point. There is research that is suggesting that if we let people take this easy road out, I read The American, I was with some black people, I have black friends, that it becomes the basis by which they rationalize behavior that is actually biased and policies that they can implement and support that are in fact discriminatory. We cannot give people the space so that they can rationalize their behavior on the basis of a few personal actions that they take that do very little to address the issue.
Can I change it just a little bit because I want to get back to Twitter. Something Ed brought up to me earlier was the notion of class, and I just want to read a tweet here from MK Stallings. White privilege is real, but not all white people are equally privileged. Immigrant heritage, social class matters. Is there an issue of class that we're not talking about here too that goes beyond race?
I think we all are multiple identities. It's and. I can't separate the part of me that's Kira who's black, who's African, who's a woman, who's a professor, right? You can't take those pieces out. And so in our field, we call it intersectionality, right? There are intersecting ways in which my identity influences who I am. So change any part of that, and I have a different experience. So yes, class is important. Yes, nationality is important, and all those other identities. So to focus in and talk about race does not mean that those things don't matter at all. It's important to think about race in our city because it's such a prominent issue.
I know you want to jump in. We only have like 90 seconds or less on the live stream, and I want to bring up one other thing coming from Twitter, and that is that we didn't really talk about tonight that we thought we would talk a lot about, and that is that Del Mar divide that got that internet shared piece all over the world, and a lot of people thought it was inaccurate. But I just want to throw that out there, and your thoughts. 90 seconds.
It's absolutely true. I teach human diversity and social justice class at Washington University. My first assignment that I make my students do is go to the Schnucks on Lindell and the Schnucks on Clayton Road. They are to write a 2-page report about the differences that they see at those grocery stores. And it is amazing. I mean, it is everything from the size of the parking lot, security guard, produce, calorie count, calorie descriptions. I mean, everything is absolutely different, and that is this Del Mar divide conversation.
Place matters as much as race matters. And particularly in a community like ours with the fragmentation model of governance, then we see that where you live makes as much difference. But there's also significant overlap between those two. There's a reason why there's that Del Mar divide, and there's a reason why there's carriage houses on one side and tenements on the other side.
Yeah, but I want to make the point, and I've often made this point about the Del Mar divide, that those houses were built before black people lived in those neighborhoods. That divide existed a long time. There was a divide within the Jewish community north of Del Mar and south of Del Mar. Now that doesn't discount the fact that it still exists, but I wonder if that divide is part of a normal part of a city. We see it racially now, but again, those buildings were built before black people were living there.
I'd like to add one thing.
Yeah, go ahead. You got your mic on.
My realtor told us we moved in the south side of Del Mar. He said the police, he had home on the south side. The police department met with the community people, said, don't worry, we answer when you call. We don't do like we do on the other side. Wow. That was from the police department.
I just want to add
Yeah, go ahead. Last word.
Simply that when I moved to St. Louis, my wife and I were looking for a house, and my wife is African American, and our realtor driving us looking for homes had no problem, no reservation about telling us we wouldn't want to look north of Del Mar because it's dark up there. And there was no reservation whatsoever with my wife in the car. It's so ingrained, it didn't even register to them what they were saying. It was just, don't look, you guys don't want to look at houses north of Del Mar. So it's an astonishing thing how ingrained it is in this region.
And I think it would be a mistake to forget.
Grab the mic. Last word.
Race is a part of the creation of a narrative that that divides people of similar social class backgrounds, and it allows policies to persist that privilege a very, very, and increasingly small portion of our population.
As American as apple pie, but Barrett says. I think we may have to do another show on this. I don't think.